Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Rose Writes and I write and narrate Miraculous Ladybug fan fiction. Thank you so much for all of the love the first part of the story got. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. If you haven't seen it, I will link it below, so check it out. Also, thank you to Cat Saturn for their amazing artwork in my thumbnail. She is incredibly talented, so her info will also be linked below. Now then, enjoy Happily Ever After, Part 2. Adrien, no longer a prince, shimmied down the rope ladder. With one final wave to Plagg, he dashed off. The gate stretched far to the sky, but the bars happened to be uneven, so Adrien wiggled himself through. The sunlight beamed down on him, feeling almost unbearably hot beneath the black cloak. Almost, but not quite. Adrien would give up every bit of comfortability to be amongst the people he would someday rule. The streets lined with people at the marketplace haggling on various goods. He could smell delicacies like fresh macaroons and croissants. "Free sample?" A woman approached carrying a tin tray of raspberry scones. The scent tickled his nose and sent his mouth watering. "You mean I can have this?" Adrien said, his hand outstretched, just millimeters from touching a pastry. "Of course, dear. That's what free sample means." The small woman pushed the tray farther into him. He took the fluffy pastry, eating it in 2 bites. "Delicious. Thank you, ma'am." The woman smiled and nodded before moving to offer the next guest a taste of her food. The prince resumed down the cobblestone street, taking in the sights and listening to the continued conversations of the people passing by. His hooded head swiveled back and forth, making sure not to miss a thing. It's amazing no one asked him why he wore all black, complete with a hood, in the extreme heat. He did catch a few people staring, but then quickly averting their gaze. He looked like he was up to no good, honestly. As he meandered around town, heads in the cloud and oblivious to his surroundings, a young woman walked in his direction quite clumsily. She had a stack of fabrics piling far past her line of sight. The fabrics were luxurious, mostly silk and soft to the touch. She stumbled, tripping over an uneven part of the path, several items falling from her hands. This caught Adrien's eyes. She fell not far from him, so within 2 lunges he arrived at her, stooping to his knees. He grabbed a few bolts off the ground, dusting them with his own cloth. His gloved hand reached out, grabbing the same fabric as the clumsy girl. He jerked his hand back, peering at her from under his hood. His hands clammed up as they lingered on the fabric as he saw the most impossibly beautiful girl. Eyes more blue than the sea. Hair pulled back by a baby pink ribbon that matched her dress. "Sorry, but, thank you, sir." She pulled the fabric back from his hands. The girl waited for Adrien to respond, but when none came, she turned to leave. "Wait!" he choked out, arms stretched towards her. "Please, allow me to help you. Your arms look full." He stood motionless as she stood, taking in all of him, from the shady look of his black cloak to his hooded head. She hadn't even seen his face, but still she replied, Okay, sure, weird guy. Little hot for all that, isn't it?" She gestured towards his unique attire, handing him a few bolts of fabric. Adrien chuckled. "I don't mind, it's not too bad." He lied, but he definitely couldn't tell her the truth. That he's the prince no one has seen in years. That he hasn't been allowed outside the palace, just like a prisoner, except the prison was his own home. "What shall I call you?" "Wow, so formal." She giggled, a sound that was like music to the prince's ears. "I'm Marinette. And you are?" The sway of her dress mesmerized the prince as they walked together. He desperately tried to stay in the moment, free from distractions. He racked his brain. As much as he had wanted to leave his palace, he forgot to think of a secret identity. A name, any name. He stuttered, rubbing his head nervously with his free hand. As his mind searched for any random name he could think of, he noticed his hood peaked in 2 places atop his head, appearing similar to cat ears. Cat! Call me Cat! Adrien breathed a sigh of relief. It may not have been a great cover name, but it was something, which was more than he had 2 seconds ago. Cat, he said, pondering this for a moment. Okay, nice to meet you. Marinette entered a small cottage, taking the fabric from Adrien's hands, placing it on a large counter to be sorted. But this wasn't the only fabric to be found. From wall to wall, fabric lined the shelves in a variety of colors, textures, and finishes. Wow! Adrien said absent-mindedly, removing his hood, revealing his face for the first time. He rubbed his head, unflattening his hair. He glanced around at the fancy garments hanging on mannequins. Nice, huh? I actually need to get to work. You know, the prince is having a ball in a few days, so I'm crafting some gowns, she said with an eye roll. Oh. He sensed she felt a sort of resentment towards the royal family, but the reason was unclear. Are you not going? Marinette laughed as if Adrien just told the most hilarious joke. She wiped a stray tear from her eye. Good one, Cat! You should know that us common folk aren't allowed at the palace unless we did something wrong. I'm just a seamstress. She shrugged, picking up a golden fabric, stretching it across the counter to make some marks. Marinette, I know this sounds crazy, but I'm... He paused, looking at her expectant eyes. He nearly goofed, telling her his real identity. The prince shook his head. I'm an employee at the palace. Really? Marinette said, not quite sure what to think. An eyebrow cocked in amusement. Of course. Here, take this. He pulled something hidden from beneath his cloak in his pocket. Adrien stretched across the counter, handing the beautiful seamstress a slightly crumpled envelope marked with a purple butterfly wax seal, the mark of the royal family. It would be an honor if you would attend the ball, Marinette. He hoped she wouldn't notice the blush spreading across his face, hiding it by placing the cloak over his face once more. She stared down at the envelope, fingers tracing the seal. Are you sure? I mean, I wouldn't want to impose. She paused thoughtfully. Does the king know you're inviting girls you meet on the side of the street? The more the merrier, Adrien said, not actually knowing if it would be okay, but he would figure it out. Dressed in a gown, there would be no way for King Gabriel to verify that Marinette wasn't royalty. To the king, appearances were everything. Wait. Time. It had to be close to 7. Marinette, I need to go. He looked around the cottage one last time, hating to leave this girl he barely knew. I'll see you at the ball, then? Adrien knew it didn't make sense to risk getting in trouble to hear her answer, but he had to. Marinette stared pensively down at the letter in her hands. She glanced over to stare at a young woman with ombre hair looking on curiously, who just appeared in the threshold of the back room. Marinette's eyes met Adrien's eager ones. You know what? Sure, I'd love to. It's a date. The prince pulled the seamstress's hand to his cloak-covered face, placing a gentle kiss. Now I really have to go. He dashed out the open door, feeling the chill of evening settling. Princesses awaiting him, but he didn't care anymore because he met Marinette, the girl of his dreams, and now, his date to the ball. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the second part of Happily Ever After. Please leave me a comment telling me what you thought and subscribe if you haven't already. As always, stay miraculous.